Hello, Mike.
Hi
Um,
there.
Hello. Welcome. First of all, could you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Mike Malidi, and I work for the Antidote service, which is an LGBT drug and alcohol service, which is part of London Friend, which is a charity organisation. And I'm an Antidote project worker there. I work with my manager, Tony Hogg, in delivering all of the Antidote services. So I do a lot of the outreach stuff. So I do a lot of external groups, and I run the Access Clinic down in South London as well.
Under normal circumstances, obviously we're living in quite extraordinary circumstances. What kind of support do you offer to people who are engaged in chemsex?
So we offer kind of like frontline work. The main kind of point of access for our kind of client base is through one of our drop-ins, which we have twice a week. From that is where we kind of, get to know the person and just see what support they feel would be beneficial to them at that time. And then we kind of like move them forward into some more structured work. So we could offer them something like a key work, which would be to support them in making changes, and kind of just keeping them motivated during that time. And then into kind of more group support work. We run a group called Chemsex, which is a harm reduction program, which runs out of Borough Street Sexual Health Centre. That's over a 6-week period. And then we got more therapeutic programs like the SWAT program, which is like the Antidote Structured Weekend program. And that's to really kind of explore the reasons why gay, bisexual men in particular would have issues around chemsex.
Great. So if you were to describe the organisation's attitude to chemsex use, I mean, what is it? Because you see lots of different approaches in healthcare towards chemsex and what that means for people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're a harm reduction service, so there is no obligation for anyone to come and see us with, an abstinence goal in place. Rather, we support people in a kind of personal, centered way, and that would be whatever they kind of want to change around their chem use. We support them with that.
You've released some revised advice for people. Um, the principal part of that message being, in essence, stay at home and have a wank. So why are you telling people to stop?
Well, we're actually not telling people to stop. What we're asking people to do is to kind of consider the consequences of kind of one drug use at this time where, people could be using alone, and that could be really problematic in terms of an overdose or mental health issues. But then also, going out into gatherings, the government have advised us to stay home and not do that. So we're advising people not to kind of join in chemsex parties. But we'd never really give the advice for people to stop using drugs because, it's up to the individual as an adult to make that decision for themselves. We do kind of just like ask them to consider actually what if they're going to use, how can they limit the impact on their either physical or mental health at this time.
Okay, so how can people limit the impact? I mean, not just on themselves, but of course on wider society now that there are all these strings attached to personal contact with other people.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like, if we take for example, anxiety, there's actually a lot of people who are feeling less anxious at the moment just because their lives have constricted. And that kind of generally means that the anxiety they normally feel with the outside world has lessened and they're less likely to reach for substances to soothe themselves. And then in other cases, because there's so much uncertainty at this time, people are feeling actually much more anxious and, more kind of, I don't know, they want to kind of reach out to something to make them feel okay. In terms of mental health, though, I guess, some of the drugs associated with chemsex, they cause an awful lot of mental health issues. And if there is this time of uncertainty, that's only going to be exasperated really at this time.
Mm. And so you're not telling people to stop permanently,
No.
you're telling people to try and restrict this permanently. You're saying this is over a limited period of time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we always kind of advise people to adhere to harm reduction information, and, kind of really general things like actually don't inject anything, kind of find a different way to administer that. because, you know, that's just kind of a real basic physical harm reduction stuff. In terms of like mental health, I suppose, you know, it could be said that maybe not using a drug like crystal meth at this time would be a good idea, just because that's probably the most kind of impactful drug around at the moment.
There is a lot of talk at the moment about how coronavirus interacts with other health conditions,
Yeah.
and whether that's producing greater risk for people in terms of when they contract the virus. So are there any risks around chemsex use and coronavirus specifically were someone to contract it, that we should be thinking about as well?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, you know, if somebody is smoking crystal meth, let's say, that's going to be impacting the lungs anyway. And we know that coronavirus, you know, it kind of attacks the lungs. So maybe it's a good idea not to be kind of inhaling anything that toxic at the moment, and, you know, stick to doing substances which aren't so impactful. But I guess, you know, for any kind of health condition, when you're taking drugs, your body is working overtime to either, you know, get rid of those drugs out of the system, or just to kind of break down that toxicity. So, you know, it's obviously not a good time to be taking any substances, because there's much more of a health risk at the moment.
Um, so I read an article the other week about gay men in New York, who were purportedly taking part in socially responsible orgies on Zoom.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
is is that the kind of activity you think that, yeah, that's okay, people should be doing that? That's kind of a way to mitigate harm, as well as allow people to keep going and not necessarily have to go cold turkey, which isn't a realistic prospect for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, social media and platforms like Zoom, they can offer a real lifeline for people to keep connected at this time. And I think Zoom has been around for many years to kind of support the whole chemsex scene. Um, on our website at the moment, we've got advice around actually how to do that in a really safe manner. And generally, that would be not to take any advice from anyone you're Zooming with about the drugs you're taking or how much you should take, and, you know, what's happening for you, either mentally or physically. Always reach out to medical advice for that. But also to follow the guidelines around consent, because even though it's a online platform, you know, consent issues are still kind of, you know, embroiled in it, really.
So when you're talking about consent, I mean, we're talking about like people, revenge porn and the abuse of people's imagery, right? So people.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely is that, but I guess, you know, to maybe have a conversation before you kind of engage in Zoom about the kind of things that you're willing to do online. Yeah, I think that's always a really good start. There is some really good guidance that London Friend did with Gallup, which is on our website as well, and that kind of outlines all of the kind of points you should think about in terms of consent.
And so what challenges are you hearing from service users at the moment, specifically things that they are struggling with?
I guess like the general kind of stuff that we always hear, and that would be obviously isolation and not feeling connected to others. Anxiety is a huge thing for people at the moment. But also, you know, people are using crystal meth are experiencing an awful lot of paranoia, just around the fact that they can't go outside anyway. And, you know, I guess they're kind of really general things that are always kind of present in our work. But I think it's the anxiety thing at the moment, and just the real uncertainty about, you know, what's going on in the world, what's going outside the door, but also what it's going to be like in the future. So, you know, that whole worry about what life may become, yeah, it's a huge thing for our clients.
Obviously, there are situations sometimes in chemsex use which will be crisis situations. And what's your message to those people who are they're in danger or they're struggling? Can they still reach out for support?
I mean, if it's a mental health issue, then, you know, every borough has an early intervention team. I suggest they would give them a call, and they can kind of like do some de-escalation work in terms of any kind of paranoia or psychotic episode they're having. In terms of any kind of physical health, you know, A&E departments are always there to help in any situations anyway. If people are really unsure, then it's best to call the NHS website. But always, if you're using substances and you know, you feel that something is not quite right, do reach out for medical services. It can be a matter of life or death.
And in terms of your own services, could you give us a little breakdown of what Antidote is doing online in the current
Yeah, sure.
circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, so we're still delivering our key work sessions, which is great. So people are still able to have that kind of one-to-one support with us. We'll also deliver a mental health intervention at the moment, and that's for people whose mental health has really been damaged by their past chem use. And like I said, we've just started to do some groups online as well. The next group that's coming up is on this Sunday, and it's called Sunday Sessions. And within that, it's a workshop. It will run for 4 hours. There'll be an opportunity for people to kind of like connect with other people who are part of that group, but also to do a workshop around isolation, support networks, and how we're all coping with being alone.
Because that's a huge issue. I mean, people not being able to go out and see anyone or talk to anyone. And I'm guessing that a lot of service users as well are finding they can't contact the people who necessarily will give them that support if they're high. They're worried about talking to them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, on our website as well, we've kind of like made a whole list of like different organizations and different kind of forums and stuff that are online, which may be easier for people to kind of use to make connections. But we're always kind of here to support people. All they need to do is get in contact with us at the Antidote email address, or just make contact with any of our services, because we are up and running still, and we'd be happy to work with people.
And so I'm trying to add bits of positivity to all of the interviews that I'm doing with people. So
Yeah.
have you had any particularly touching or uh, great stories of support that you've seen people either in the community or within London Friend offering, to people on the outside that have really made you go, wow?
Yeah, I mean, London Friend, it really runs off the goodwill of volunteers. And our volunteers have really, really stepped up at the moment. And they're doing all the work that they would normally do, but just online. And, we've got to really thank them for that, because without them doing that, our services wouldn't run like they do. So I'm really, really pleased about that. But I guess, we also hear about some success stories with the people that we work with, because, this time of kind of like isolation, it's actually given people time to reflect on their lives, and to kind of think about, well, actually, if there is a different way for me, what might that look like? And for them to be taking steps in that kind of direction. So well, we're not kind of surprised, but we're really pleased to hear that people are taking this time to really look after themselves as well. So yeah, it's a good time.